Probably better, huh? Yeah. If you want to talk about Leviticus, that's one of the places where it makes the comment about, thou shalt not lie with a man as thou lie with a woman. There are a lot of other items within Leviticus that touch on some of the things that Excalibur said, which was, that I think you can't, sleep in the same bed that a woman has her period in. And, I mean, it was a list of things. And one of the points of view that I have learned from the research I've done is that the book of Leviticus is a set of, we'll say, rules or morals that the Jews wanted to live by because they were the chosen people. And they wanted to sort of rise above everyday person, not to hold themselves over people, but to sort of actively try to live up to this great honor that their Lord and Savior, has informed them that they are the chosen people. Then there's the whole thing about there's a whole bunch of different tribes and blah, 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 and pretty much everyone is part of the chosen people, but that's a whole other topic. And then you have it that when God sends his one and only Son, that's what the Christians believe. He was a common man. He wasn't above. He wasn't over anything. So if you're going to believe one section of Leviticus, then you have to believe all of it. And if you can't live your life by all of it, then you can't just pick out certain things that you don't like. So there's that. Leviticus. My favorite, one of my favorites is the book of Ruth. If you want to read that, you can read the relationship between Ruth and Naomi. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe Ruth is the mother. Let's look in my index real quick. Ruth 104. Yeah, Ruth. No, Ruth is the daughter-in-law, and Naomi is the mother-in-law. And when Ruth's husband died, she chose to stay with her mother-in-law. And in that time, because you have to understand the historical context in which these texts were written, and in that time, a woman would not, it was just unheard of that she would stay with her mother-in-law. She was expected to return to her family and wait for another man. But what they said to each other was, where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. This is pretty much the text that has been modified and adjusted for wedding vows. Modern-day heterosexual wedding vows are grounded in this passage between these two women. So you could say, oh yeah, they were just friends. Then why would we use that as the catalyst for developing modern-day heterosexual wedding vows? Okay? So there's that. Sorry, I'm not trying to flip you off. It's just on that finger. That's what my ring says. It's Ruth and Naomi. I got one for me and my man, because it's awesome. Now, the best story is, everyone knows about David and Goliath. David was the little guy, and he knocked Goliath down, who is this giant, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure some people know, but if you read the story after that, like what happens to David after he slays Goliath, he's brought into the palace, and I think it's King Saul and his son Jonathan. And David and Jonathan have a very intense relationship. I mean, you have David rose from beside the stone heap and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He bowed 3 times, and they kissed each other and wept with each other. So it says they kissed, and sure, you can be like, oh, they were just friends, we're kissing. It goes on to say that Jonathan was pretty much protecting him from his father, because his father didn't like him anymore because he knew what was happening between them and he didn't like it. Where's the other passage I just found? The soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David. Does that sound like marriage? And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. So a lot of people just, they're really great friends. Yeah, they're really great friends, and they love each other. And sure, David goes to populate and have sex and children, but that doesn't negate the fact that there's evidence of same-sex relationships in the Bible that were pretty much blessed in God's eyes. It was important enough to be included in the text, what we have of it. That's the other thing that you have to think about, is that it has been translated. It was in Jewish, or Hebrew, sorry. It was in Hebrew. They translated it. There are points of view that King James himself was a homosexual. And we all know about the people who scream about it being so horrible are usually the ones who are practicing it. Hello, Republicans. Another one is Jonathan loved David. I just want to show you all this so I can continue my griping. I hope this isn't backwards to you guys, because it's backwards how I have my screen. Sodom and Gomorrah. To me, Sodom and Gomorrah is probably one of the weakest excuses behind homosexuality being evil, because the evidence in those stories, in that story, is that the angels came to Lot's home and he had them in there, and the men of the village showed up and banged on the door, and this is what it says. It says, we want to know them. Because, you know, there's the running joke that if you say he knew her, then it meant they were having sex. Which, if you take that, you know, take on it, then if Jonathan and David, it actually said they physically kissed, what more is that hiding? Okay? Think about it. Alright. So, they said we want to know them. If you assume that that means sex, then Lot's response should shock you, because he said, no, let me introduce you to my daughters. They haven't been known, pretty much. And so if it's about sex, and he pretty much said, don't have sex with the angels, but, you know, you can pass around my daughters like, you know, cheap 7-Eleven slushies if you'd like. Do you really think that's preferable to homosexual sex? Really? And that's the only evidence of that. And I believe in one of the books, when Jesus speaks about Sodom and Gomorrah, he doesn't talk about, he talks about their inhospitality. And that's because, again, with the historical context that these texts were written in, you have the desert, which is where these places were, and if strangers came through, apparently, if you did not take them in, the cold of night or the heat of day was going to kill them, because it was that bad. The conditions were that bad. And so it was their inhospitality that this town did not really want strangers there. And that probably stems from a greater evil, but it's not about the homosexuality. It's about the fact that they were not willing to allow Lot and his family to harbor these people who were trying to, you know, even though they were angels, they didn't know that they were angels. That's the whole thing. Anyway, so that's what I say. You know, read, understand the historical context, and in the end, if Christians cannot agree on whether or not it's okay, can we at least agree that there are enough factions of Protestants, and I'm assuming people who have studied Catholicism, I'm sure, have a lot of their own different opinions, even though they're still united under one religious title, that as long as no one is hurting anyone else physically, and I don't say, oh, you're hurting me because my kid's going to see you kiss your boyfriend and they're going to think it's okay to be gay and they're going to be gay. If your kids are gay, they're gay. They're gay. They're gay. They're gay. There's nothing you can do to stop it. All you can try to do is not make their lives a living hell with your ignorance and try to accept it, because in the end, they're still your children. They're still your brother, your mother, your father. They're pretty much the exact same person. It's your perception that is different because of your own views. So, blah, blah, blah. There you go. I'm going to go back and watch more of Excalibur's videos. Bye!